On today's news, several top WWE stars have been pulled from live events as WWE scrambles following a COVID outbreak, how that outbreak will affect day one, an update on Kenny Omega in AEW, and more. I hope everyone had a Merry Christmas if you celebrated, and now you get the best gift of all, me doing the news for a whole week. So subscribe and enable notifications so you know when all this week's videos go live.
Support WrestleTalk!
It was reported last week that WWE were struggling with a new COVID outbreak amongst their roster, and while the Christmas Eve episode of SmackDown had been pre-taped and will be unaffected, the live events and potentially day one taking place in a few days on January 1st would be the things most up in the air because of this. Dave Meltzer initially reported in the Wrestling Observer newsletter last week that a number of NXT wrestlers tested positive in the weekly Monday testing, and that there have been main roster talents who have also tested positive. It's still unknown as to how many and who has tested positive, but for NXT it may be at least a little bit less noticeable as the show tends to cycle through talent week to week, whereas something like Raw uses the same names week on week, so it might become apparent quite quickly. But the ramifications are already being felt from live events. WWE held two live events yesterday, one in Tampa, Florida, and one in Madison Square Garden in New York. Both have reportedly been massively affected by the outbreak, as Roman Reigns was pulled from the live event in Tampa. He was originally advertised to team with the Usos to face Drew McIntyre and The New Day. Meanwhile, Seth Rollins, Big E, Becky Lynch, and Bianca Belair were all absent from the Madison Square Garden event, where it was going to be Seth versus Big E versus Kevin Owens in a steel cage, and Becky versus Bianca also in a steel cage. As a make good with the shuffling around, it was announced that NXT champion Tommaso Ciampa would defend the belt against Pete Dunne at the MSG show. And also, a wild Edge from out of nowhere was reportedly rushed to MSG to fill in, according to PW Insider. He had a steel cage match against Kevin Owens instead. I now feel like I want to see this feud on TV and not, you know, Edge versus Miz. However, it's worth noting that according to Dave Meltzer on Twitter, not everyone that was pulled from these shows has tested positive. Just to note that not everyone off tonight's WWE shows tested positive. There are people being kept off the shows who haven't tested positive to minimize risk, so the pay-per-view headliners are at less risk of having to miss the event on Saturday. However, it seems we do know one name who has tested positive, as Seth Rollins tweeted out to say, "Merry COVID Christmas to me," before talking about the footballs or something. It's then likely that his wife Becky Lynch was affected in some way, either testing positive herself or isolating due to contact with Seth. Dave Meltzer also originally reported in the newsletter that there is concern within WWE because they will be traveling more extensively right after Christmas, so now, which we're seeing the effects of. With the inaugural Day 1 event this Saturday, a show which WWE reportedly want to make a really big deal, which is why they've got Reigns versus Lesnar there and not at the Royal Rumble later in the month, it's not looking great for them. However, since these positive cases came in earlier last week, there's a chance that some of the talent will still be able to work the pay-per-view, as it will be over 10 days since they tested positive. So it's all a bit of a mess, really. WrestleTalk would like to wish anyone who has tested positive a speedy recovery and hope they can get back to wrestling soon. Someone else who's going to look to get back into wrestling soon is Kenny Omega, who has been off our screen since his loss to Hangman Adam Page at Full Gear. Omega reportedly took this time off so he can have multiple surgeries because good God, that man has been working through a lot. After Kyle O'Reilly debuted in AEW last week, it's now being teased that there's an redacted era versus Elite feud cooking, with Adam Cole caught between the Young Bucks and his new buds, or old buds, I guess. So what does this mean for Kenny? Is he going to be returning soon to reunite with the Bucks and thwart the dastardly redacted era? As per the Wrestling Observer newsletter, there is currently still no firm timetable for Omega's return to AEW. However, previous reports have noted that the plan was for him to return in February 2022, but Tony Khan has reportedly told Omega that he can take however much time he needs. Omega was forced to relinquish the AAA Mega Championship ahead of the surgeries, and the vacant belt was won by Ehil del Vikingo at Triple Mania Regia. He'll now be defending the belt against John Hennigan, aka John Morrison, aka Johnny Mundo, aka Johnny Impact, aka Johnny Drip Drip, aka that lad who did that one thing that one time, and Omega has said that he'll be taking another shot at the title in Mexico once he's healthy. And speaking of people we're hoping get healthy soon, nailing those segues today, is Triple H, who underwent a very serious cardiac event earlier this year and hasn't been performing his usual backstage duties at WWE headquarters or in NXT since before its rebrand to NXT 2.0. Shawn Michaels recently spoke with Denise Salcedo, where he spoke on what it was like having to take the lead on the changeover what with all that paint, without Trips being around. I think the biggest thing was that I didn't know I was going to be the one having to do everything. I was going to hopefully assist Hunter and put into place what he wanted us to put into place. It came a bit quick, obviously. For the last 35 years that I've been with the WWE, when they make a decision, it's done, it's quick. They are so efficient, so quick, and they just don't sit and wait around. I think that was probably the biggest adjustment. I think we had probably 3 weeks and we didn't have a whole lot of information. By the time we got the information, it was coming down by the last week, and we went ahead and applied everything that we could. It would have been a lot easier had he been there the entire time to assist, that's for sure. And as for the head honcho himself, Shawn provided an update on his health too, as he was recently pictured at the WWE headquarters in Stamford, Connecticut. Most of it is me bothering him, to be perfectly honest. He has worked so much over the last several years, and I don't think he understood that it becomes your normal. For him to go 100 miles an hour to nothing was an adjustment, but I think he is, especially around this time of the year, he's now starting to realize, like, hey, this isn't too bad. I think he's bordering enjoying himself now, to be perfectly honest. It's a well-deserved break for him. After letting his NXT contract expire earlier this month, Johnny Gargano is currently a free agent in the wrestling world. Many have speculated about his next move, whether he would re-sign with WWE following some paternity leave or not, and we have an update courtesy of Dave Meltzer on Wrestling Observer Radio. Just things he's said both publicly and privately. I mean, I know he's heavily considering going to AEW, put it that way. Gargano would be joining his former NXT cohort, Adam Cole, Bobby Fish, Kyle O'Reilly, Andrade El Idolo, and Malachi Black, to name a few, if he did head over to AEW. And I, for one, would really like him to do that, because I don't know if everyone knows this or not, but Gargano's a really good wrestler, and he could put on some more really good matches. Oh my god. We could finally get Gargano versus Danielson. Gargano, please sign with AEW, please and thank you. After Ring of Honor's final battle earlier this month, the company has essentially gone on hiatus, releasing all their talent from their contracts and cancelling all touring plans. Ring of Honor COO Joe Koff recently appeared on the Ring of Honor Strong podcast to explain a little of the decisions behind the hiatus and to clarify a few points. It was really business oriented. Let's go back to 2019. We made a decision that in order for us to be as relevant or to be as competitive in the fans' mind, we needed to have a bigger program, a primetime offering high production and high talent. You don't make a decision in January and start from March. These things are thought out well in advance. You have to plan, you have to figure out how it's going to work and what's the return on those efforts and ideas. So back in 2019, nobody could have foreseen what happened in 2020. So we built our company around 52-week live programming, basically. Well, we were ready to go in July 2020, everything was in order, we were plugging along, and then all of a sudden, March came of 2020, and the world as we know it stopped. Ring of Honor was one of the companies that stopped running shows entirely during the height of the pandemic, though they retained their talent under contract and still paid them. Arguably, the promotion who has handled the situation the best. What should we do next? What can we do next? What would be the next logical step? That's where we are in the process right now. So we're still basking a little bit in that sunlight, and we have some really nice things up our sleeves for around the first of the year. As we get into the first quarter of 2022, we will maybe start seeing not only the blueprints, but the actual design of what the next Ring of Honor will look like. Best of luck to Ring of Honor as they try to figure out their next steps.
Anyway, I'm sad to inform you that not every wrestling match was as good as my top 10. In fact, quite the opposite. Some were either a waste of time, laughably produced, or the old classic, a slap in the face with a giant clown glove stuffed with rotten eggs and piss. To close out what's honestly been a pretty rubbish year, we're running down the most rubbish wrestling matches that people had to pay their hard-earned money to watch.